Good afternoon. Good to be here today. Just a quick disclaimer at the beginning. I did not design the facilities that I'm going to be talking about, but we are assisting them with extending those both in duration and to help develop some additional water supply. This project is really a story of both conservation and reuse, and pretty dramatic on both fronts, and I'm going to touch on both of those. Wichita Falls, of course, is a little over a couple hours from here. They serve about 150,000 customers with waters, and including 15 wholesale customers. They have 3 lakes that they use. 2 of these are fresh lakes, Lake Arrowhead and Lake Kickapoo, and then they also have a brackish lake, Lake Kemp. Their current storage is now at 22%. It's continued to drop. The worst of the drought was in 2011, but as you'll see, the drought is still continuing for them. They have 2 water treatment plants. The larger is the Cypress plant and then the Jasper plant, which if you're passing through on 287, you'll see it's right next to the highway. Most of that is conventional treatment, but they also have desalination, 10 MGD capacity at the Cypress plant, and that is to treat that brackish water from Lake Kemp. So, man, is it hot. Doesn't seem like it today, but if you've been in Wichita Falls over the last few summers, it's been extremely hot. They average about 28 days over 100 degrees in a normal summer, but in 2011, 100 days over 100 degrees. So just wrap your mind around that for a little bit. Then they follow that with 50 days in 2012 and 32 days in 2013, still over their average. But it's a dry heat. Well, that's really nice if you're sitting in the shade taking a sip of something in the afternoon, but for water supply, that doesn't help a bit. On top of the heat and the dryness, they also had some record winds that were really pushing the evaporation out of their reservoirs. So rainfall, they averaged 28.5 inches, but in 2011 they were 15.5 inches below normal, so less than half their normal rainfall, followed by two more years with less than normal. 2014, I don't know the final numbers, but it's going to be probably pretty close to normal, but not anything to catch them up. So this is what their 116-year rainfall history looks like, and you can see before 2011 they'd never had a year where they had less than 15 inches. So you can see the 50s drought, which was the drought of record for most of Texas, but then you look at the far right and you can see those 3 years, 11, 12, and 13. So most of Texas, you can see from this map, most of Texas was in a severe or worse drought across the state. And last year, the map looked a whole lot better unless you were in Wichita Falls. Pretty severe. That's considered an exceptional drought, the worst category that they have. So what does this do to the lake levels? Well, this graph is from early 13, when they were really needing to make some hard decisions. And you can see that at that point they had dropped below 40% of their two combined freshwater lakes. And there's some, you can see the dashed lines there that show some things that could happen from that point. The red line was if they had another year like 2011. The green line was if they had another year like 2012. And the blue is if they had a normal year, where they would kind of coast along at that 40%. Well, actual is that you see the little orange dot on the far right edge there. That's where they are now. So, what have they done about it? This interesting thing to see is that they actually went into this drought in really good shape. They had their lakes at 97% full. By late 2011, they had dropped down to the 60%, or by the end of the summer, they had dropped down to 60%, which was their stage 1 drought level. These drought levels, fortunately, had been ratcheted up a little bit from their previous drought so that they would be responding a little quicker, which is very fortunate that they did. So middle of 12, they hit 50% drought warning. And then by early 13 is when they really got serious and put in major watering restrictions and so forth. And you can see where they've continued to fall. They had to invent a new category, stage 5 drought catastrophe, for when they drop below 25%. So they're at 1,246 days and counting of water restrictions. I know a lot of people in this area have also faced some pretty severe watering restrictions, but I would just say if you think your grass is hurting, go to Wichita Falls and see what it's like there. There's no outdoor watering, no car washing, no pool filling. And what that has allowed them to do is to go from consumption of 35 million gallons a day down to 11 million gallons a day. They've actually got summer water usage that is the same as their year-round usage, which is just incredible. So in April of 2012, staff pulled out some water reuse planning that they had done after the previous drought. They'd done actually quite a bit of planning and some pilot testing, but as you know, as you go through water-rich years, sometimes memories fade and budgets get crunched, and so some projects get put off. But they went back to.
Please bear with us. Hey, all right. Let me check one thing real quick. Okay.
All right. We're back.
Okay, I think we're ready to move on. Okay, so they did revive their reuse plans, and they started looking at some additional reuse plans. They did meet with TCEQ staff. TCEQ's been pretty responsive to drought issues, and so they began talking about both direct potable reuse options, which that would mean a project where the treated wastewater effluent never is discharged to the environment, or indirect potable reuse, where that water would be discharged back into a water source. and actually they proceeded on a dual track, developing both an emergency direct potable reuse project and a permanent long-term indirect potable reuse. And I'll talk a little bit about both of those. They did work with TCEQ to work through the requirements and the level of treatment that would be required. And they hired some consultants to evaluate the long-term program. The staff developed in-house the emergency direct potable reuse project, and that'll be the primary focus. So the River Road wastewater treatment plant that does treat the wastewater effluent for most of the city has a normal flow of about 12 million gallons a day, but with all the drought restrictions, that flow has come down to about 7.5 million gallons per day. They've extensively tested the water for 16 months, found that of all of the EPA drinking water requirements, that effluent, without any further treatment, already met all but 3 of them. And that was nitrate, trihalomethanes, and the microbials. So the nitrate, they've made some fairly minor modifications to the wastewater to try to help that, but they're also relying the direct potable reuse will go through their brackish water desalination treatment process, and that process will remove the large majority of the nitrate. We'll also remove some of the trihalomethanes, and they've modified their chlorination process to incorporate chloramines that are reducing the trihalomethanes coming from the wastewater effluent. And then they've got several steps in place to address the microbials. So the emergency reuse project consists of a temporary pump station and pipeline to take 7.5 million gallons a day of treated effluent from the River Road wastewater treatment plant over to the Cypress plant. And that water then goes through their desalination process, which includes microfiltration or membrane filtration and reverse osmosis. And then that permeate, the water that's been through both of those processes is then blended with at least 50%, at least an equal amount of their fresh water from the Airhead and Kickapoo reservoirs. And then that blended water goes through their conventional water treatment process. So the staff developed a concept paper and worked with TCEQ on that, then prepared an engineering report. This is just what the overall system looks like. So you see in green at the top is the wastewater treatment plant. That effluent then is sent to the MFRO plant, the membrane plant at the Cypress facility, and then it goes into a lagoon and then it's blended. You can see the additional supplies coming in, the brown color at the bottom, and then it goes through their conventional treatment plant with regular sedimentation and sand filters, and then is chlorinated and sent out to the system. So they began construction on that in August of 13 and got TCEQ approval. Then last spring did a very extensive, actually 2 rounds that totaled 75 days of full-scale verification testing. So TCEQ was not satisfied with the previous pilot testing that had been done, and so they required this additional extensive testing where they ran full scale but did not put that water in the system. And after the 2 rounds of testing, they did get TCEQ approval at the end of June, and started up the system and began blending there in early July of last year. They do add 5 million gallons per day of supply to their system, which represents almost half of their current water demand. So very big deal to their water supply situation. The original approval was for a 6-month operation. They said if you're going to run longer than 6 months, you have to add UV disinfection. They were concerned about the amount of barriers, that they were just barely going to meet the cryptosporidium requirements, and so they added, and they're in the process of adding that UV. They've gotten 2 additional months to get that in place, and that equipment is on site now and piped up and will be started up in the next few weeks. This is the route for the effluent from the, as luck would have it, the River Road plant is up at the far northeast side of the city, and the Cypress plant is down at the southwest end of the city. So the challenge then was to get that water across town with as little cost and as quickly as possible. Local consultant Biggs & Matthews took that design on, and it's a pretty impressive feat. They used a HDPE pipeline above ground, and it's been placed in drainage ditches and through culverts. There is not a single bore in the whole stretch of pipeline to get from one end of town to the other. All of it is either above ground or in culverts. So a little bit of a circuitous route, but to accomplish that without burying or boring any of that pipeline was pretty impressive. And their intent is to take that pipeline and actually move it and reuse it for their permanent indirect project, which they're moving forward with. So this, just a few pictures. This is the welding machine that bonds the lengths of HDPE pipe together. You can see where it's being laid in a drainage ditch there. And this is their temporary pump station at the River Road plant. So, in addition to the technical hurdles, there's also the regulatory and public approval. TCEQ gave general approval of the concept paper. The devil was in the details, as they found out, but they did get through that process. The wholesale customers were very supportive. They have one of the poorly known things about Wichita Falls is they have this long-standing relationship between their public health group and the water utility, which really helped in this project because there's a lot of trust built up, and so the medical community was already had a line of communication with the water utility. They really started that after the cryptosporidium outbreak in Milwaukee back in the 90s. And I think there's another story there that they need to share with the water community. That I'd like to see a lot more of those kinds of interactions between the public health community and the water utilities. But they very early on got some of the local doctors to buy into this. When they showed them what the level of treatment was being provided and the protections that are in place to prevent any diseases passing through this system, they got good buy-in from the medical community, and that was then broadcast to the general public, and they've really had excellent public support. There's a really well done video that the city did in-house that I would really encourage you to go look at. It's on their website. It's about a 5 to 8 minute video, and it's really impressive what they've done to communicate the safety of this project and get the buy-in of their city. This is just one of the treatment steps, microfiltration. It's a submerged membrane system, and that's followed by the reverse osmosis, which is another membrane process to take the salt out, but it's also taking out many of the microconstituent or small concentration compounds that we might be concerned about. And this is what the water looks like as it's finished with the desalination steps and is going into a temporary lagoon before it will be then blended with their other raw water and treated conventionally. When they looked at a more permanent solution, they looked at several options: discharge to Lake Arrowhead or Lake Wichita, or constructing additional desalination facilities at either of their two plants. The Lake Arrowhead indirect project was found to be the most feasible, and that's what they're moving forward with. They got their discharge permit to take that water into Lake Arrowhead. They got that last fall, and design is underway on that project. It'll also include some improvements at their wastewater treatment plant and 17 miles of right-of-way. That project is expected to go online middle of 2017, and that will give them an additional 8 to 10 MGD of water supply capacity. That will replace this temporary direct project that they're using right now. Some other things that they're looking at are, now they're only using 5 million gallons per day of capacity through their desalination facilities. They have 10 MGD of capacity, so they're looking at how to incorporate their Lake Kemp supply, which has been offline now for a couple of years, how to bring that back into the system without giving up the potable reuse project. In fact, we've got a meeting with TCEQ later this week to work through some of those issues. They've also looked at cloud seeding. I'm not going to spend much time on this, but they are looking at every option that they can think of. Cloud seeding is a real thing. It's not black magic, but it is expensive, and it requires quick response because clouds actually have to be seeded after they're formed. So you can't just manufacture water up there. You're just trying to make it go ahead and fall as rain when it's there. They've also experimented with some evaporation suppression. There's a unique product that still in the testing phases. They did a test last summer on Lake Arrowhead. It's been shown. There's still a lot of debate about some of the results, but at least the manufacturer has claimed that it could reduce evaporation by up to 30%, which would be a pretty big deal. Unfortunately, it requires pretty much continuous application, and it's not real inexpensive. Water Development Board is actually reviewing the results from Wichita Falls and should be having something published here shortly. So, in conclusion, They have developed this immediate supply of 5 million gallons per day using their treated wastewater effluent. They will proceed with the indirect program to send that water. And the reason a lot of people have asked, if you've already got this DPR system and it's working, why do you want to change and go to the indirect? And you have to take the water farther. And the answer, a couple of answers. One is through the desalination process, they lose a substantial amount of that supply, and up to a third of that supply is lost through the desalination treatment processes. And the other is that facility was designed to treat their Lake Kemp supply, and they want to restore it to that function and be able to use it to treat Lake Kemp rather than the DPR water. So they'll get more water from the indirect project long term, and so that's why they're proceeding with that. They're also looking at building an additional reservoir, Ringgold Reservoir. They have looked at groundwater. It's not an area that's rich in groundwater, so that has not been a major source for them, but they are still looking at both local and more distant supplies for groundwater. And with that, I'd be happy to try to field some questions.